this is an awesome time of the year to have this presentation because we're all working in our gardens a lot with this cooler weather. And if you're like me, you're a fair weather gardener. You like to get it all done before the heat sets in. And we've already seen a lot of activity of birds and butterflies and such in our gardens. So maybe you can take some notes and you might find a couple of plants or something that you want to go purchase to add to your garden. So tonight, we're going to be talking about how to attract birds, butterflies, and beneficials to our wildscape, and possibly about how to create a wildscape as well. This presentation, as Dick said, is brought to you by Tarrant Regional Water District and the Tarrant County Master Gardeners. We partner with Tarrant Regional Water District. We've been doing this for several years. They came to us and asked, hey, we want to help people conserve water, use water more resourcefully. And TRWD is one of the largest area suppliers. They bring all of our water in from places like Richland Chambers, Cedar Creek. Those are big, huge pipelines that come all the way up to our area. And they can add more and more pipelines, but they thought, well, if we could just teach people how to be conservative with their water and water usage, then we may not have to build as many new pipelines for the growing population. So what they have put together is a great website, which many of you all may have already registered for this class through their website. But some of the things you may not know is that they offer free sprinkler checks for Tarrant County residents. You get to that on their website. You can get a free weekly watering advice. And I found that you have to sort of take that sort of loosely, because like Burleson may get 3 inches of rain and Teller may only get a half an inch of rain. So they try to tell you by your area how much watering you need to do. They also have calendar events like for this event and classes like this one, and lots of water saving tips and videos. So please take a minute to check out their website. So we're going to talk about inviting wildlife into our garden. And some of us who are master gardeners, and when Dick said I got my master garden degree or certification in 2014, I realized that was 9 years ago. The time has just flown by. So in that time period, I have created an unbelievable wildscape in my yard, just like almost every other master gardener does. And basically, when you start getting the knowledge of gardening, you start implementing it, and then you have a huge garden on your hands. So for a wildscape and or for a wildlife garden, you're going to provide food, water, and shelter. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what those mean. You're going to, some of those can be super simple, and then some of them can be pretty intricate. Bird seed or a hummingbird feeder for birds, dish of water or a bird bath or a swimming pool, and we'll talk about that. Shrubs to hide in or to nest in. And you know, most of our birds, they like to nest lower down, lower to the ground, not way up in the trees where the squirrels or hawks can get them. They like to be in dense shrubbery. Or it can be very extensive wildscape, and you can have tons of native plants and all kinds of logs and things in your garden where wildlife can nest and burrow. So, but most important with this whole presentation, we're going to talk about no chemicals. Why have a wildscape? Well, a lot of us like to relax on our patios, We like the calmness of being uh, embedded in nature. And we take our small little space we have, our little piece of earth, and we try to, would like to create a very relaxing space for us to enjoy the wildlife. And so they don't just come to us, we have to actually provide things for them in order to bring them closer. So we like to bring birds, butterflies, and beneficial insects, small animals, and of course, native plants. And if it's a healthier yard, it's good for you and it's good for them. How to make a wildscape. So first you want to decide what you want to attract. We're hoping you don't necessarily want to attract possums and skunks. Some people may, but do you want to attract birds? Do you want to attract butterflies, moths, those types of things, lizards, toads, frogs? So what's the best way to attract it? How much space do you need to have that? In most cases, you need very little space. You can provide food, water, shelter, and safety. The food, in most cases, is going to be native plants or a dish of food. Water, maybe a puddle, a bird bath, a pond, and still a swimming pool. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Shelter, shrubs, rocks, trees, and brush. So believe it or not, if you have some boxwoods or such under your windows in the front yard, or some dwarf Burfords or something, there will be cardinals and such nesting in those, as long as you don't have a kitty cat who likes to sleep underneath the shrub like I do. And then safety is just a really safe place to raise their young. And as again, we talk about that cat that likes to sleep under the bush. That's not very safe. Preparing your soil for nectar plants. So we've talked about what is needed, shelter, food, and water. Now we're going to talk about having nectar plants available to the things that you bring into your gardens. And one thing to remember is that birds during the winter, they need, well, in early spring when they're young, babies are young, they feed the babies worms. But in the summer or in the spring, they'll feed their babies worms or caterpillars or something. So the babies can't eat the seeds until they're older. So having nectar plants and having a really good soil that attracts worms and caterpillars is really, really good. Creating a successful garden starts with preparing the soil the plants will thrive in. So first you want to identify your soil type, and is it a clay? Is it caliche? Is it sandy like I have? And they want to say sandy loam. There's not much loam. There wasn't much loam in my garden or my property. It's just mostly sand. You're going to add some compost. Maybe you're going to add some peat moss, some expanded shell to clay. So you're going to find out what type of soil you have and what you need to amend it in order to get the right soil structure to grow our nectar plants. So clay soils, you're going to add expanded shell and maybe some green sand. Sandy soils, you're going to want to add lots of compost. And one of the things that I've done over the years, besides add mulch, is I throw a landscape mix under my mulch when I mulch every year or every other year. And I'll throw a landscape mix. It'll break down a little faster than the mulch will. And I definitely add some landscape mix as I plant plants. So rocky soils, I'm sorry, but you might just need a bulldozer, or you might just want to attract lizards. So install a drip irrigation system so you can control the volume of water provided. On my property, we have mostly overhead sprinklers, and I will tell you they're very wasteful. They spray the foliage. What needs to be watered on our plants are the roots. So a drip irrigation system is ideal if you're ever putting in a new bed of any sort. I recommend drip irrigation, and you'll get the most optimization out of every gallon of water when you do that. So when we talk about a wildscape, there are three things we need to really discuss. There's three main pesticides. There's insecticides, fungicides, and herbicides, most of which can do more damage than good, and they need to be used very sparingly. Fungicides, I understand. Sometimes you'll get some fungus in your garden or in your grass, and you need to apply those. I do use these three things, but I use them very sparingly. And like if I need to control some woody weeds or something on the backside of my fence or that type of thing. So be very careful with these, because once they're applied, the pesticides are like a broad spectrum, non-selective spray or drench, and all the beneficial insects will get destroyed, as well as non-beneficial. The larvae of our beneficial insects will die if they consume plants treated with these pesticides. The bees will die if they collect the pollen treated on these plants. And then what's worse is the stormwater runoff carries these pesticides to water catchment systems, and that's where you start seeing the green plumes of algae and such in the water catchment systems. They get into our rivers and lakes, and we get a high levels of potassium in those areas, and that can be really detrimental to our ecosystems. And so when I go to Home Depot and Lowe's and big box stores this time of year, and all I see are pallet after pallet after pallet of all kinds of weed stopper and just weed and feed, things like that for your garden or your yard, I just cringe, because most of the time it's not applied correctly, and when it is applied, it can run off into our drainage systems, and I think your neighbor would benefit from it more than you, but the birds and bees are not going to benefit from it. So I encourage you to search out other types of treatments like sticky traps, insecticidal soaps. I like neem oil. There's dormant oils. I'm sorry, say that 3 times real fast. Crazy. Horticulture oils. Marshall Green has, and I'm not plugging Marshall Green by any means, but I do know they have a huge selection of very garden-friendly items that you can purchase for select causes and diseases. So, but they also offer some of these at your big box stores. And then you can also select plants that kind of help deter other pests like marigolds and citronella geraniums and things. But so keep those things in mind when you're treating your yard. So wildscape features for attracting butterflies. So butterflies are so beautiful, and we love to see them in our yard. Butterflies need nectar food, and they have proboscis, I think that's what it's called, their long snout that goes down. So they really like more trumpet-shaped flowers. We also want to plant the plants that are host plants for caterpillars. They need water. They can get that off of a leaf after a sprinkler, after a rain. They can get it off of a saucer from a plant pot. They can get it off of a rock, off a waterfall from your pool. So they can get water from a lot of different places. They need shelter, and they'll find the shelter under your shrubs and things. They don't necessarily need a butterfly house. And they need a place to rest in the sun. So food for butterflies is the nectar from flowers. Butterflies are attracted to hot red, pink, orange, and purple flowers. They really like trumpet-shaped flowers. And those are everything from your honeysuckles to your salvias, things like black and blue salvia. They like, they also like things like Greg Smith's flower. Just there's tons of different plants. We're going to have a list here in a minute. So they like it to where they can get the flower is kind of flat, and they can get in with their proboscis and suck the nectar out of the flower. They also like saucers of rotting fruit, and the problem with that is you've got to be able to keep the ants out of it. So in specific plants, you can see some of these butterflies are lighting on plants here. In these pictures, these are all really pretty. So let's talk a little bit about these nectar plants, perennials. I think your garden isn't complete unless you have most all of these in it. And all of us have some sort of sun. Very few people have full shade, but most all of these will do very well in full sun. So asters of any variety, goldenrod, but that is not ragweed. They look very similar. Garden phlox, which is just, there's different kinds of phloxes, and those are all good. But summer phlox, our regular standard 3 or 4 foot tall garden phlox, is just amazing. Butterfly weed, which is also, we want to call that a milkweed. Blanket flower, blazing star liatris, coreopsis, coneflowers, stonecrop sedums, black-eyed Susans, bee balm. Bee balm is awesome. Don't know if any of you all have grown Jacob Klein. It's lovely. I lost my whole bed of Jacob Klein from the drought last year. Might have been also the freeze, but I'm not sure. Anyhow, and then Greg Smith's flower, which spreads, so remember that. Abelias, I have quite a few different varieties of abelias in my yard, and the bees just love them, but the butterflies do too, the swallowtails, and then garlic chives, which is kind of neat. Then annuals, lantana, some people can grow it as a perennial. Zinnia are amazing attractors of butterflies, marigolds, and cosmos. So hopefully you have some of these. If not, take a snapshot of this list and go out shopping this weekend. There's a few plant sales coming up this weekend. Oh, and I just realized my speaking event on Saturday got canceled, so I know where I'm going Saturday now. I'm sorry, that was just a thought there, Dick, if you heard me. I'm going to the plant sale on Saturday now. So hummingbird, other types of foods for butterflies, hummingbird feeders. Butterflies will be attracted to those. Rotting fruit in a tray. I don't know if you've ever been to Fort Worth Botanic Gardens, their conservatory. When they do the butterfly event, they'll have trays of water with some rotting fruit in it, and you'll see butterflies lighting on those and eating. And then sweet stuff painted on tree trunks. or in a saucer. And when I say sweet stuff, it might be a honey or a salve of some sort. Um, and you can Google that and see what people paint on their trees. It'll also attract ants too, so you might want to be careful with that. And then water for butterflies. Definitely have to have water. They like shallow water. So they like it when it's a little bit on a rock or in a crevice of a rock or on a leaf. They don't like deep water. So if you have just a bird bath that doesn't have any sprinkling water coming from it, they might be less likely to drink from that as a mud puddle. Butterflies love mud puddles. They also like to drink the dissolved minerals and nutrients in natural water. Rocks in bird baths are awesome. So if you do have a bird bath, you could put a rock in there. Maybe the birds would splash water onto the rock, and the butterfly would drink that. And then a very shallow saucer. And then shelter for butterflies, rest and protection. They need that. In the summer, butterflies can find many places for shelter, but in the winter, butterflies need more protected shelter. So that might, evergreen shrubs will provide that. And for those that don't migrate, so it's really interesting. We don't see the activity in the winter, but they're still in our garden. And but they're all nestled up underneath some leaves, or they're nestled up under some dead shrubs. But they find their warmth and their protection. But they'll hibernate in tree bark and wood piles and tall grasses in the winter. And host plants for butterfly caterpillars. This is one you might want to take a snapshot of because it's always good to refer back to when you're out shopping. Monarch likes milkweed. Their larvae only eat milkweed. Black swallowtails, they like carrots, rue, parsley, dill, fennel. I have a fun story about about the rue. One of my girlfriends, who's not a master gardener, had some rue plants around her swimming pool. And I called her one day and I said, "What are you doing?" And she says, "I'm picking all these caterpillars off my rue." And all of those caterpillars were black swallowtail caterpillars. And I was like, stop doing that. And so, of course, they're going to eat the plant. That's exactly what a caterpillar does. And that's why we plant these plants. And so now she doesn't do that. And her root is still looking really pretty. So anyhow, just be mindful of what type of caterpillar you're trying to eliminate from your garden. Tiger swallowtails love wild cherry, which we really don't have here. Don't really have birch as much as we have tulip trees, sycamore trees. Pipevine swallowtails love Dutchman's pipevine. If you ever get a hold of any of that, you need to handle it with kit gloves in your garden and make sure it survives. Because it's not really easy to find. And I was out at a girlfriend's, another master gardener's house, and she had planted it, and it was beautiful. It was just growing everywhere. And I just wanted to give her $20 and dig some up. But anyhow, so that's a great plant to have in your garden. The fertility loves violets. If you have any violets, like wild violets in your yard. And then the Buckeye caterpillar like snapdragons, which is interesting. I don't know that I've ever seen a caterpillar on a snapdragon, but the morning cloak likes willow and elm trees, and the viscera likes pussy willow, plums, and cherries. And none of those are real popular here, but you can plant them in your garden. Plums for sure. So there are a good list for you. And then the caterpillar to butterfly monarch stages. So you can see here we have the milkweed on the smaller picture with the chrysalis, and that's so pretty. And so you want to be mindful of those. You want to look for those on the underside of leaves, but more importantly, you want to look for little bitty larvae on the underside of your milkweed. Those little larvae are going to grow into this beautiful caterpillar down here. They're going to have eaten most of your milkweed, and then they're going to form a chrysalis, and then the monarch will come out, and it's just going to be beautiful. So you can see here, some people said that they had milkweed that so 5 caterpillars could devour milkweed in an hour. I mean, they can just eat and eat and eat. And so you want to make sure you have plenty of it for them. And so if you can get it going and have it going, that's great. They will really appreciate that. So those are, I just think they're striking, their colors. And then other larva food, fertility only passion vine. So if you have passion vine, you may see some of these emerge. So you can become a certified monarch way station or habitat. I'm going to give you this. You can take a picture of it. You can go to monarchwatch.org, get an application. Not quite sure what the requirements are today, but that's kind of a neat. They'll want you to have, information about what plants are in your yards, especially what nectar plants for monarchs, and then if you have some milkweed, things like that. If you also offer the shelter and the water and the food for them. The wildscape features for attracting birds. So we talked about butterflies, let's talk about birds. So birds need food, water, shelter, and a place to rest, a good place to raise their young. So we have always had cats, and our cats have always been indoor-outdoor cats. So we don't get very many young babies in our yard, but we do get a lot of birds, but they must nest in somebody else's yard. So cats are a very big deterrent to birds, and that's kind of sad, but that's just how our ecosystem works. So bird feeders, you can have all kinds of bird feeders. I'm sure you do. The fun ones. And then on the hummingbirds, we definitely don't want to use red nectar water. We want to use clear water, just regular sugar water, not red water. The dye in the red water is not good for them. But the feeder itself is red, so it will attract it'll attract the hummingbird to the feeder. So anyhow, the lots of different feeders available. And then we have ground feeders, and robins are ground feeders. So they like castings of nuts, pellets. They'll also eat what spills from your feeder. They like mealyworms, and so your blackbirds, your robins, wrens, and house sparrows are all ground feeders. So don't forget about those. And it's fun. Robins usually come in flocks, and after it rains, we'll see them in our grass, pulling out worms. Kind of fun. And then trees and shrubs for birds. So I have a possum holly, which is red berries. We also have yopon, that's beautiful red berries. Your hollies, all of those produce food for the birds in the winter. Also, we encourage you not to cut your nectar plants, your native plants, back to the ground until February, because the birds will eat the seeds from those. They really enjoy those in the winter, and they'll take the seed heads and pick the seeds out of them. So you don't necessarily have to have a bird feeder in your yard. You can just have your plants and just leave the stalks of your spent perennials up until February. Water sources. So we have a swimming pool that has a water fountain, and the water fountain, it's a waterfall, and the water cascades over the rocks, and the birds will light there and drink that water. They're not drinking enough, and our pool doesn't have an excess amount of chlorine in it. So, but they're not drinking so much that it would harm them. But they will come up and do and drink the water from the pool, and then the water will splash out onto other areas. You can definitely have a bird bath, which is wonderful. The sprinklers, when our sprinklers run, sometimes in the summer, you'll definitely see the birds flocking to them, especially when we had that drought last summer. It was amazing to see how many birds were coming by. It's kind of funny. They probably have a route they take in the neighborhoods, and they say, okay, the Stutsman's water at 7 o'clock at night, and so waters at 5 o'clock in the day. And, so they rotate around so they make sure they get their water, because man, it was so hot and dry last summer. That was tough. So then you can provide shelter. My girlfriend, who was picking the caterpillars off her roof, she has bluebirds nesting in a box just like that. She's a member of the Texas Bluebird Society and has a few of those boxes. And so she's super excited about that. My yard has 65 post oaks in it, and many of my post oaks have holes in them from where limbs have rotted out or something. And those birds will harbor in those holes. Most of the time, they'll see squirrels in there. And then it's really interesting that the birds will nest in a lot of things like roses, Sharons, and Japanese maples. And you won't even notice that they were there until they have dropped all their leaves in December. And then you see the nest, and you're like, wow, that was right above my head, and I didn't even know it. But so lots of places for the birds to nest. It's always great to have homes for them. And then all birds are not seed eaters. So if you live in my neck of the woods, you're going to see every one of these birds almost every day. I have a roadrunner. We've seen several over the years that we've lived here, but have one that's been eating a lot of worms out of my garden, out of my lawn lately, and he or she is really sweet to watch. Plenty of hawks, because we have rabbits in this area and squirrels. And then we have our turkey vultures, and then our obviously our woodpeckers, and there's several different varieties of those. So anyhow, those will all like bugs, like mealy bugs, any kind of worms, or small rodents. Like I think I've even seen a hawk catch a snake, and I think they'll pretty much almost catch anything. So make sure you're mindful of these guys too. And wild spaces may attract other wildlife. So we have dragonflies, and we get a lot of those around our pool. We notice them more around our pool. And I don't know if any of y'all have a pool. If you stand in your pool and you hold your little finger up like this, away from you a little bit, the dragonfly will come and light on your finger. and then you can watch it up close. It's super fun to do that when you see them out. So we got dragonflies, which are wonderful. They like to eat mosquitoes. And then we have all kinds of moth. We have a hawk or a hummingbird moth, an IO moth, and then an angulus moth, prominent moth, which we see a lot of those. So really, really kind of cool to see all those. So if you're going to attract butterflies and birds, you're probably going to be attracting moths. And then our beneficial insects, and this is where the pesticides and herbicides are very important, because we want these in our yard. We want a big garden spider. We want lacewing bugs. We want praying mantis in our yard and lacewing eggs. They're tiny little eggs. Those are those little bitty white spots. Those are the eggs. Those just add pest control. And they're just awesome. They like to eat aphids. They like to eat other flying insects like mosquitoes, flies. So definitely something you'd want to have in your garden. Frogs, toads, geckos, lizards. I had never heard of a buffo toad before. I kind of had to look him up. I don't believe I have one of those in my yard, but I do have toads. Blue frog, have seen those. They're little bitty. The ones I've seen were little bitty. Geckos, those are kind of transparent, a little hard to see. Then we have our spiny lizards, which are really cool. But we also have anoles. I have many anoles in my yard. Love to watch them and listen to them and watch their throat expand when they're chirped. And then I have some green frogs, tree frogs. Don't ever see them on trees, but I see them on some of my plants. They're kind of fun. And then we have small animals, and whether you like them or not, they're out there. And in my neck of the woods, I'm on an acre. It's pretty wooded out here, so we have all of these, and none of them seem to be a huge problem for us. My possums like to come eat my figs in the summer. I think that's fun. I had a raccoon who left my door of my garden house open all summer. I typically do that so it stays a little cooler. And she came in and decided she wanted to take up house in the rafters. Well, we had to run her out. That was not going to be acceptable because I need to be in and out of that place a lot. And she would just poke her head up from the soffit. And I was like, you're going to have to go, sweetheart. And last thing I needed was a whole bunch of babies. So definitely have a lot of wildlife around here. And then we have our larger animals. And I have all of these too. Even though there's a lot of population here, there are a lot of coyotes and bobcats. And if any of your neighbors or any of you all have chickens, I can promise you have them too, because our bobcats and our coyotes have chicken coops every night. If they can get in that fenced in area, they will. The bobcats like to sleep on top of the chicken coops. Wild turkeys, they're not as friendly as you would think. So be careful when you approach one. And then we have deer. I've never seen one in my yard, but I've seen one, half a mile down the road. And I've seen a few people have deer feeders, I guess just because they enjoy having the wildlife come to their garden. So I'm not interested in having deer come to my garden because deer will almost eat everything. So that's not a gardener's friend. A deer is definitely not a gardener's friend. So you can have a wildscape, and you can actually get a certification for a wildscape if you're interested. And so you take a picture of this page. The feed may have changed since this was printed, but you can definitely look this up and see if you want to get a national wildlife wildscape habitat certification. And go back to that one more minute in case somebody wants to take a picture of that. And then you could do a Texas Parks and Wildlife habitat certification. It's a little longer form and there's a few more requirements. I don't know what the pricing is on that. It was something like $30 before, but definitely a fun certification that you can have a placard in your yard if you'd like, and brag to your friends. But anyhow, so you might be interested in doing that. So, but I want to thank you all for joining us tonight. As we said, I'm a Tarrant County Master Gardener. This presentation was originated by Marilyn Sully, and I've edited it quite a bit, but some of her beautiful photographs are still included. If you ever have a question regarding any kind of plants, soils, trees, you're more than welcome to call Tarrant County Master Gardeners. If you want to take a picture of this page, you'll get our contact phone number. We have a help desk that we try to man 5 days a week from 8 to 4. And then we also have our email, and you can email. And if you have a plant disease problem or something that is hard to explain, please take a picture of it and attach it to your email. But we will try to answer your questions and get you an official answer. But at this time, we can open this all up to questions. And I will stop sharing my screen.
Wanda, there's one question.
Okay.
Anne says her friend has a problem with deer eating her garden plants. What's the best way to keep them out?
I'll move.
I read there is a repellent. I was watching one of the online classes the other day, and unfortunately I can't remember the name of the stuff, but there is a granule that you can put, and I think it'll even deter squirrels. So I've been kind of looking to see if I can find that stuff, because that sounds like it would work great.
Right. I don't know what to tell you about the deer, but I don't have that problem. But I do know people who have had it, and they say there are plants that are deer resistant, and there are some that are very much so deer resistant. But of all the things that we really enjoy planting, I think they tend to gravitate towards those. So fences, electric wires, things like that. Nothing that would hurt them. But anyhow, so I'm sorry, I can't answer much more than that. You can call the helpline. They may have a brochure that specifies. I'm not sure. What else we got?
I was just going to jump in. We've had a neighbor that used a couple of things where it was motion sensor, like it was attached to their sprinkler system, and that would, spritz if there was motion, or a light sensor. So that might be something.
That's an awesome idea. That's an awesome idea. I like that. It didn't hurt the animal. So what else we got?
Is there a website or chat to identify caterpillars, or chart to identify caterpillars?
Oh gosh, all you have to do is Google caterpillar identification, and on images they'll come up with tons of charts. And you can do Texas caterpillars, and there'll be tons of charts that'll come up.
I've noticed someone said that they've been told that fox urine will help deter deer. I mean, their noses are very sensitive, so I could see where that might deter them. So
Yeah,
that's a
so
thought.
fox urine also deters snakes as well. So we've had to use it a few times. Stinks. Um, anyhow, what else do we, any other?
That's all I see in the chat.
Mhm.
Wait a minute, here's some more. Let's see. Do you have any recommendations for pest control companies that use organic or non-harmful products?
So as master gardeners, we try not to recommend one particular company. And if you call our helpline, they may have a list of a few that, but as far as organic or non-harmful, I know I've seen a few trucks going down the road that may state that. Again, I think I would just Google some local pest companies and look at their websites and see what they offer. But I can't recommend off the top of my head just one. Not being very helpful. Sorry.
I did find the name of the repellent that I've heard about.
Okay.
It's called Plant. It's PLANT Sky, SKYDD. Plant Sky DD.
ED like an Ed.
DD, the DD like in deer.
Oh,
And it's a repellent.
okay. Cool.
I remember the Plant Sky, I just didn't remember the rest of it.
Okay.
You can Google it and get information about it.
Yeah. Is there an all-natural repellent for bad moths? There's one of those cats right there.
One of those bird getters.
Yeah. This one isn't, but
Okay, well that's good to
Yeah.
know.
That's okay. The other one is so repellent for bad moths. No, and if you're talking about inside your house, I'm not sure how, obviously you have mothballs and stuff like that. And I mean, you can put mothballs outside in your flower beds as well. Sadly, one of the things that we do is we have these little mosquito attracting devices that you've gotten at the big box stores that attract the mosquitoes and suck them in under the fan, and then they can't get back out. And that also attracts moths. And so sometimes we have to open them pretty regularly to let the moths out and not let the mosquitoes out. So sometimes we're capturing a lot of moths, which is not necessarily great. So, and then there was another, Elena is asking, are there any ferns that like full sun? So people are planting the foxtail fern in full sun. Now, I have a few, and I think they still like to have a lot of water, just like an asparagus fern, but because I think that's kind of the family they're in of ferns. And so that is the only fern I know that would grow in full sun. The rest of them can do a little morning sun and afternoon shade.
I noticed we have a question. This presentation is being recorded and it will be edited by Nancy Curl. And then you will get a copy of the recording. So you will be able to see a recording of the presentation, everyone that is registered.
Mm. So somebody did post that they use Safe Haven Pest Control and they're all organic, except for termite control. They're not organic, but that's kind of cool. So there's a good recommendation. Was that it?
I think that's it.
Oh, the native vine purple clematis. Is it hard to grow? Purple clematis is not hard to grow. It's a real delicate vine until it gets well established. The stems can break very easily, but it's not hard to grow. Morning sun, afternoon shade, it does really well. Anything else?
I don't see anything else.
Best start for a new yard to make shade. So Chris is asking, Chris, I recommend a pergola. You can create shade. Last year, because of the drought and the intense heat, I put the shade sails up in a few places. They can be done very attractively. And we also had a presentation from a gentleman who's a meteorologist who also has these shade sails. You can get them off of Amazon, and you can tether them to your home or you can tether them to trees, and they can come in colors and they can be very attractive. Or you can put poles in the ground, which to be real sturdy, that would have to be a very stout pole, but so that can create shade. But then I would recommend getting some faster growing trees, and those are going to be things in your maple. Maples tend to be not Japanese maple. I'm talking about like Shimards, and what else, Dick? What other kind of tree is a fast growing tree?
Vitex, did you talk about that one?
Well, there's Vitexes, there's smaller. Crepe myrtles tend to takes them several years to get taller. You can also plant some evergreen shrubs that are faster growing, like Nellie R. Stevens, which get really large. Don't plant those up next to your house. Burford hollies, Foster hollies get tall. So just really start with your basic foundation shrubs and trees, and plan them out accordingly. But until you get those, I recommend a pergola and or shade sails. Chinese pistache, Tracy said, is a fast growing tree. It sure is. And it's good. That's a fun tree because it gives you some color in the fall. It gives you beautiful color in the fall.
Yeah, as long as you get the male and not the female tree, you're in good shape.
Exactly. Well, everybody, thank you so much.